My daughter has been out of contact for the past 5 years. Tonight at 3 a.m., a mysterious man called me, his voice choking with tears. Your daughter is in danger. Your daughter. Oh, bisio aspilia spies. Before I could finish my sentence, a door slammed shut and the line was completely cut off. In the dimly lit library of the solitary mansion, my hands trembled, my seasoned lawyer instincts roaring that this was no joke. I had to uncover the truth before it was too late. This story starts quietly, but it won't leave you unchanged. One small thing before we start, drop a comment and let me know. Has anyone ever tried to come between you and family? Yes or no? I read every comment you leave. Some details are fictionalized for storytelling purposes. What matters most is the lesson this story carries. The phone rang at 3 in the morning, shattering the library silence like a gunshot. I set down my bourbon glass and stared at the screen. Unknown number. At 62 years old, after spending 3 decades winning cases in federal courtrooms, I'd learned to trust my instincts. Nobody calls at 3 a.m. with good news. Garrison Vance, I answered, sobbing. Desperate, ragged sobbing from a young man mid-20s, I guessed barely able to form words through whatever terror had seized him. Your daughter, he choked out. Your daughter is in danger. Your daughter... Who is this? I stood, every muscle in my body going rigid. Where is my daughter? There's no time. The voice dropped to a whisper. I shouldn't be... A door slammed in the background. The line went dead. I hit redial. The number rang once, then an automated voice. The number you have dialed is not in service. I tried again. Same result. Again. Nothing. My hands shook as I set the phone on the oak table where 5 generations of Vance family lawyers had worked. The mansion around me stood silent in the way it had since my wife died 3 years ago. Vast, empty waiting. I'd been alone in this house for so long that silence had become a companion. But tonight that silence felt different. Dangerous. Cassandra. I hadn't heard my daughter's voice in 1,825 days. I'd counted every single one. The stranger's sobbing echoed in my mind as I walked through the dark hallway to the east wing. My feet knew the path. Without thinking, I'd walked it hundreds of times over the past 5 years, always at night, always alone. The door to Cassandra's bedroom stood closed just as she'd left it. I pushed it open. Moonlight fell across furniture exactly where she'd arranged it at 17. Blue curtains she'd chosen herself, books alphabetized on shelves, her forensic science degree from Georgetown framed on the wall she'd invited me to graduation, at least. Let me sit in the back row. Didn't speak to me afterward. That was 6 years ago, before everything broke. I sat on the edge of her bed and pulled out my phone, scrolling to the last message she'd ever sent me. 3 lines, not even a phone call and email. Dad, I'm getting married next month. I've decided it's best if you don't attend. Cassandra. April 2020. I'd stood outside the church gate that day anyway, watching guests stream through the entrance of St. Catherine's in Richmond. White dress spring flowers string quartet. I saw her arrive in a car I didn't recognize, wearing a gown I'd never seen, holding the arm of a man I'd met exactly once. Vance Sterling. The name still tasted like poison. I'd sent birthday cards every year since. All returned unopened. I'd called every Christmas Eve. Voicemail never returned. I'd written letters explaining, apologizing, begging her to just talk to me for 5 minutes. Silence. What kind of danger required a sobbing stranger to risk everything at 3 a.m.? The question burned through my lawyer's mind, trained to see patterns, to find the thread that unraveled the whole case. A young man terrified enough to cry, desperate enough to call a number he shouldn't have. He knew something. Something about Cassandra. Something urgent enough to override his fear. But I didn't even know where she lived anymore. The wedding announcement said Richmond, but she could be anywhere now. The private investigator I'd hired 3 years ago, against every instinct that told me to respect her boundaries, had found an address, a job at a medical research firm, a life that didn't include me. I'd paid him and then deleted the file. If she wanted me gone, I'd stay gone. Except tonight someone had shattered that silence. I stood and walked to her window, looking out over the Virginia estate where she'd grown up. The gardens her mother had planted, the oak tree her grandfather had climbed, the rose bushes that bloomed every spring, whether anyone was here to see them or not. "Where are you, sweetheart?" I whispered to the empty room. The last time we'd actually really spoken face to face was April 2019, the charity gala where she'd introduced me to him, Vance Sterling, 28 years old, perfect smile, expensive suit, hand possessively on her shoulder. Something in his eyes made my prosecutor instinct scream. Not something I could name, not something I could prove, just a coldness behind the charm. I'd pulled her aside that night, told her I had concerns, asked her to be careful to take her time to let me run a background check, just standard due diligence, the kind I'd done for 30 years in federal court. She'd looked at me like I'd slapped her. "You don't trust my judgment," she'd said. Quiet, deadly quiet. "I trust you. I don't trust him. You don't even know him. Cassandra, I'm asking you to wait 6 months. Let you what, Dad? Investigate my fiancé like he's a criminal. Control my life like Mom never could. Or si sai, das died." The accusation hit like a blade. My wife had died the year before, cancer slow and cruel. Cassandra's grief had been complicated, wrapped in old resentments I'd never fully understood. And I'd stepped directly into that wound. And that's not what this is, I'd said. But it was too late. I saw it in her eyes, the door closing. The daughter I'd raised alone after her mother's death, the brilliant girl who'd inherited my analytical mind, and her mother's fierce independence looked at me like I was a stranger. 1 month later, the wedding email. 5 years of silence. But tonight something had changed in that silence. As pale morning light touched the bourbon glass I'd left untouched in the library, a hidden memory from April 2019 surfaced, the memory of the night everything began. The night I first met Vance Sterling, the cherry blossoms were in full bloom, and I knew instantly, viscerally, that something was wrong. April 2019. The annual Vance Family Charity Gala. 150 guests scattered across the estate gardens under canopies of white and pink blossoms. My wife had been dead for a year. Cassandra had just turned 23, finishing her master's degree in forensic science at Georgetown. She'd been helping me organize the event the way she had since she was 16. I was standing near the fountain when she found me, her hand wrapped around the arm of a man I'd never seen before. "Dad," she said, and her face held the kind of radiance I hadn't seen since before her mother died. "This is Vance Sterling, the man I love." He was 28, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most cars. Dark hair, perfect smile, the kind of handsome that belonged in cologne advertisements. He extended his hand. "Mr. Vance," he said. "Cassandra has told me so much about you. It's an honor to finally meet." I shook his hand, held eye contact, felt the coldness immediately. Not in his grip that was firm, professional, not in his voice that was warm, respectful, but in his eyes. While his mouth smiled and his words flattered, his gaze moved past me to scan the mansion, the gardens, the oak trees planted by my grandfather. He looked at my home the way a real estate appraiser calculates value. "Welcome," I said. "Cassandra speaks highly of you." We made small talk. He worked in investment consulting, he said. They'd met at a medical research fundraiser 6 months ago. He loved that Cassandra was brilliant, driven, compassionate. All the right words, all the perfect notes. But I'd spent 30 years in federal courtrooms reading people who lied for a living, and Vance Sterling was performing. After 10 minutes, he excused himself to get drinks. I watched him walk away, watched how his eyes continued cataloging the property-counting guests, measuring wealth. "Sweetheart," I said quietly, "I just want you to be cautious." Cassandra's radiance dimmed. "You always do. I don't know him well enough yet. Let's take time to run a background check like he's a criminal? That's not what I'm saying." But it was, and we both knew it. She looked at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Disappointment, hurt, the realization that her father didn't trust her judgment. "Mom always said you saw threats everywhere," she whispered. Then she walked away. That was the last time my daughter looked at me with anything like trust. How many fathers have watched their daughters introduce the man who will destroy them, and known it and been powerless to stop it? I stood in the dawn-lit library 6 years later, that memory burning like acid. The 3 a.m. call echoed in my mind, a sobbing stranger, a warning about danger, a line gone dead. I picked up my phone and tried the number again. Automated voice. "The number you have dialed is not in service." Again, same result. I called my phone company, waited through automated menus until I reached a human. "I need help tracing a call I received at 3 a.m., I said. The technician pulled up the records. "That number shows as a disposable SIM card, sir. Prepaid, already deactivated. There's no way to trace it back to a user." "Can you tell me anything about it? Only that it was activated yesterday afternoon and deactivated within minutes of calling you. Whoever used it knew exactly how to avoid being tracked. I thanked him and hung up. 7 in the morning. I stood in the kitchen making coffee I wouldn't drink, staring at nothing, trying to piece together fragments. A terrified caller, my estranged daughter, 5 years of silence that might not be silence at all. My laptop chimed. New email, unknown sender, no subject line. I opened it. 2 lines of text, no signature, no context. Meet me, Wednesday 2 p.m., Riverside Cafe, Chester. Come alone, Dr. C.B. That was all. Chester was a small town 1 hour north of Richmond, far enough for discretion, close enough to reach. The kind of place you chose when you didn't want to be seen. Dr. C.B., a medical professional, someone using only initials, someone who knew to contact me, someone who knew something. I read the message 3 times, the careful distance of it, the specific location and time, the warning to come alone. After 30 years in federal courtrooms, I'd learned to read fear in a voice, desperation in a message. This email screamed both. Whoever Dr. C.B. was, she was terrified of being traced. The disposable phone, the anonymous email, the public location an hour away. Every choice designed to create distance to avoid detection. But she'd contacted me anyway. That meant whatever she knew was urgent enough to override her fear. I checked the calendar. Today was Monday. Wednesday was 2 days away. 48 hours to wait, while my daughter faced whatever danger the sobbing caller had warned about. I stared at the screen. 2 lines from a stranger, an anonymous summons. A meeting that could be a trap, could be a hoax, could be the beginning of understanding what had happened to the daughter I hadn't spoken to in 1,825 days. I didn't reply to the email. Didn't need to. Dr. C.B. had chosen a public cafe in daylight she wanted, witnesses' safety and escape route. She'd be there whether I confirmed or not. In 30 years practicing law, I'd learned one crucial thing. The person trembling when they contact you usually holds the most dangerous truth. I closed the laptop. Wednesday, 2 p.m., Chester. I would be there. Wednesday arrived cold and gray. I drove north for an hour through Virginia countryside, my mind turning over every possibility. A trembling stranger's email. A desperate 3 a.m. call. 5 years of silence that might not be silence at all. The Riverside Cafe sat wedged between a closed pharmacy and a used bookstore in Chester's main street. Small town. Quiet. The kind of place where people noticed strangers. She was already waiting when I arrived, dark coat, trembling hands wrapped around a coffee cup she hadn't touched. I recognized her immediately, not from having met her before, but from the specific kind of fear in her eyes. The fear of someone about to destroy their own life to save someone else's. She stood when I entered. 40 years old, I guessed. Professional clothes beneath the coat. Dark circles under eyes that hadn't slept. "Mr. Vance?" she asked quietly. I nodded and sat across from her in the corner booth. Far from windows, back to the wall, she'd chosen carefully. "I'm Dr. Chloe Beck," she said, chief obstetrician at Richmond Women's Hospital. "My sister Harper Finch, she kept our mother's name after the divorce as a nurse at Richmond Fertility Specialists." I kept my face neutral. "Go on." 2 months ago, Harper came to my house at midnight. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. Dr. Beck's hands shook around the coffee cup. She told me something she'd done, something she'd been paid to do. Paid by whom? Vance Sterling. She met my eyes. "Your son-in-law paid my sister $120,000 in 6 separate transfers over 18 months. The payment started during your daughter's first IVF cycle." The cafe suddenly felt very small and very quiet. "And what did he pay her to do?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. "To swap the sperm donor sample during the second IVF cycle." Dr. Beck's voice stayed clinical precise. A doctor delivering a diagnosis. Cassandra and Vance had been trying to conceive naturally for 2 years. When that failed, they went to Richmond Fertility Specialists. Standard IVF protocol. Except during the procedure, Harper was instructed to substitute a different donor's genetic material than what was documented in the official records. I felt my hands curl into fists beneath the table. Why would Vance Sterling pay to use a different donor? 6,000 and we and ballad. Because he needed the baby to not be genetically his. He needed proof of infidelity that didn't exist. She took a breath. "Mr. Vance, why are you telling me this? Why now?" "Because your daughter is 9 months pregnant," Dr. Beck said quietly. And when that baby is born, Vance Sterling is going to destroy her. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope, slid it across the table. My sister kept copies. She was terrified, but she kept evidence. She knew what she'd done was wrong. She knew eventually she'd have to... Dr. Beck stopped composing herself. Open it? I did. The first document was a prenuptial agreement, 23 pages. I'd never seen it before. Cassandra had never mentioned signing one, though that wasn't surprising given our estrangement. I flipped through the standard clauses: asset division, property rights, inheritance protections. Then I saw page 7. Dr. Beck reached across and tapped a highlighted paragraph. Section 4.2, she said, infidelity clause. I read it twice to make sure I understood. If either party's infidelity is proven through genetic paternity testing or other medical evidence, the unfaithful spouse forfeits all claims to marital assets and agrees to pay $2,500,000 in damages to the faithful spouse. Additionally, any inheritance or family trust funds shall be redirected to the faithful spouse as compensation for breach of marital contract. 30 years in federal courtrooms, I'd seen fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. But this was different. This was a 6-year plan to destroy one woman. Keep reading, Dr. Beck said. The next document was a medical record, Vance Sterling's name at the top. Diagnosis from a Richmond urologist dated 4 years ago, before the wedding, before the engagement, before he'd even met Cassandra at that charity gala. Complete azoospermia, 0% sperm motility, congenital bilateral absence of vas deferens. Medical conclusion. Patient is 100% infertile. Natural conception impossible. He knew, I said quietly. Dr. Beck nodded. 4 years before he married your daughter, Vance Sterling was diagnosed as completely infertile. He knew from the beginning that any child would require a sperm donor. The IVF wasn't about starting a family. It was about building the trap. Yes, her voice cracked. He married her, made her fall in love with him, convinced her to sign this prenup, went through the motions of trying for a baby naturally, knowing it would fail, then suggested IVF, knowing he'd already bribed Harper to swap the donor sample. All of it designed so that when the baby is born, he can demand a DNA test, prove the child isn't genetically, accuse Cassandra of infidelity, invoke this clause, and take everything. I stared at the documents spread across the table, the prenup, the medical records, the bank transfers to Harper Finch. How much is at stake? Dr. Beck asked quietly. $8 million, I said. The Vance family trust, 5 generations of accumulated wealth. Cassandra is the sole heir now that her mother is dead. So he gets $2.5 million in damages plus the entire $8 million inheritance. $10.5 million total. My voice sounded distant clinical, the lawyer in me calculating while the father in me screamed, for 6 years of work. He designed this before the wedding, before the engagement, before the charity gala, where I'd shaken his hand and felt the coldness in his eyes. He'd researched my family, found Cassandra, learned about the inheritance, built a plan so meticulous, so patient, that it had taken 6 years to spring. I looked down at the prenuptial agreement Dr. Beck had spread across the cafe table. Page 7, bottom right corner, my daughter's signature, round, confident, trusting handwriting. Vance Sterling dated April 2020, just 3 days before her wedding. She'd signed her own trap without knowing it existed. Leaving the Riverside Cafe, I gripped the steering wheel tightly on my drive back to Richmond, unable to shake the image of the trap my daughter had signed. Then I gathered the documents, walked to my car, and started the hour-long drive back to Richmond. The road gave me too much time to think, and suddenly a memory I'd dismissed years ago surfaced with perfect, terrible clarity. October 2018. 6 months before the charity gala, where I'd first shaken Vance Sterling's hand. I'd been at my law office downtown, the one I'd closed 3 years ago, after my wife died, when I'd retired from federal practice. It was late afternoon. My assistant had already gone home. The phone rang. Garrison Vance speaking. Mr. Vance, my name is Michael Ross. I'm a freelance journalist working on a piece about generational wealth in Virginia. Young voice, professional, polite. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about your family's estate. I'd done interviews before, public interest pieces about historic Virginia families. Nothing unusual. What would you like to know? I'd asked. The Vance family estate has been in your family for 5 generations, correct? That's right, since 1847. And the current property includes the original mansion, approximately 200 acres, and various investment holdings. Approximately, yes. How is the inheritance structured? Does it pass to a single heir, or is it divided among descendants? I'd answered, told him about the family trust, about how it passed undivided to the eldest surviving child of each generation. Standard estate planning for families trying to preserve wealth across centuries. And your daughter Cassandra is the sole heir now that your wife has passed. Yes. What protections are in place to ensure the estate remains in the family if she marries? I'd explained prenuptial agreements, legal structures, asset protection strategies, all routine information, all public record if you knew where to look. Thank you, Mr. Vance. This has been very helpful for the article. The call had lasted maybe 15 minutes. I'd never seen an article, never thought about it again. Until now. Driving through Virginia darkness, my hands gripped the wheel hard enough to hurt. How does a predator choose his prey? He studies them first, learns their wealth, their vulnerabilities, their legal structures, maps out every detail before ever saying hello. There had never been a freelance journalist named Michael Ross. It had been Vance Sterling. 6 months before meeting my daughter at a charity gala, she'd helped organize a gala whose guest list I'd probably discussed in interviews or public records he'd called me directly. Asked me to explain exactly how to steal my family's fortune. And I'd told him. Every detail, every protection, every legal structure he'd need to understand to build the perfect trap. He knew about the money before he knew my daughter's name. I pulled into the mansion driveway just after dark. Didn't go to bed. Went straight to the library, opened my laptop, and started searching. If Vance Sterling had done this before, and Dr. Beck's evidence suggested a pattern, this sophisticated couldn't be his first time. There would be traces, victims, police reports, something. I searched his name first, nothing. Then I tried variations. Vance S. Sterling, V. Sterling. Nothing credible, just social media, accounts a LinkedIn profile claiming investment consulting, work photos at charity events. I changed approach, searched for patterns instead of names. Boston, financial fraud, disappeared boyfriend, wealthy victim. 3 pages into the results I found it. A tabloid article from January 2017, small headline, bad photograph. This Back Bay woman reports $350,000 loss after boyfriend vanishes. Police investigating. I clicked through. Valerie DuPont, 40 years old at the time, had reported her boyfriend of 18 months missing, along with $350,000 from her investment accounts. She'd met him at a fundraiser. He'd worked in finance. They'd moved in together. She'd trusted him with access to certain accounts for estate planning purposes. One morning, she'd woken up to find him gone. Money gone, no note, no explanation. Just empty closets and empty accounts. Boston police had opened an investigation. The article mentioned they were gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, tracking financial transactions. I kept reading, found 2 follow-up pieces. February 2017, police continue investigation into missing boyfriend, $350,000 theft. March 2017, nothing. I searched for more recent articles, found one from April 2017, buried in the local news section. DuPont investigation, quietly closed, no charges filed. The article was 3 paragraphs. Authorities had opened the case in January, gathered evidence for 3 months, then the investigation was quietly closed. No arrests, no explanation. Case sealed by order of the district attorney's office. Valerie DuPont had declined to comment. I searched for the suspect's name in the original articles. Never mentioned. The photo they'd included was deliberately obscured, pixelated face, blurred features. But the physical description was there. Male, late 20s, dark hair, finance background, charming, well-dressed, met victim at charity fundraiser. 3 months of investigation, then nothing. Cases don't just close themselves. I'd worked in federal courtrooms for 30 years. I knew exactly what it took to make a criminal investigation disappear. Not just stop disappear, sealed records, no charges, no explanation. It required money, serious money, or power, serious power, or someone with both who had a reason to protect Vance Sterling. The timeline fit perfectly. Boston in 2017, 8 years ago. Vance would have been around 23, the same age he'd been when this pattern apparently began. Same method, find a wealthy woman, gain her trust, access her money, disappear. Except this time, he'd refined the approach. This time, he hadn't just stolen and run, he'd married the target, built a 6-year trap, made it legal, made it look like her fault. I stared at the screen at the words, "Case quietly closed," glowing in the darkness of my library. In 30 years practicing federal law, I knew exactly what it took to make a criminal investigation disappear, money power, or both. The question was simple and terrifying. Who had protected Vance Sterling in Boston 8 years ago? I didn't sleep that night. Spent the hours searching for private investigators in Richmond, reading reviews, checking credentials, looking for someone with the skills to dig where police had been paid to stop digging. By dawn, I had a name. Thursday morning, I stood outside Crawford Investigations in the Richmond suburbs, knowing I'd reached the edge of what I could uncover alone. The office sat above a dry cleaner in a small commercial building. Single door, frosted glass window with black lettering. No receptionist. I knocked. "It's open!" a woman's voice called. I pushed through into a space smaller than my library. The walls were plastered with case photos, newspaper clippings, red wire connecting names and dates like a spider's web. 2 desks, one buried under file boxes, the other holding 3 computer monitors showing what looked like financial databases. Melissa Crawford sat at the clean desk, 35 years old, with sharp eyes that sized me up, in the 3 seconds it took me to close the door. Former Richmond PD detective, according to her website. 8 years on the force before going private. "Mr. Vance?" she asked. "Yes." "Sit." She gestured to the chair across from her. "You said on the phone it was urgent. Family matter, time sensitive, start from the beginning." I did. Told her about the 3 a.m. call, about meeting Dr. Chloe Beck in Chester, about the IVF fraud Harper Finch bribed to swap sperm samples during my daughter's 2nd cycle, about the prenup trap with its infidelity clause designed to steal everything, about Vance Sterling's medical records proving he'd been completely infertile for 4 years before the wedding. I told her about the journalist call from October 2018, about researching my family's wealth 6 months before ever meeting Cassandra, about the Boston victim Valerie DuPont, who'd lost everything to a man matching Vance Sterling's description before the investigation mysteriously closed. Melissa listened without interrupting, took notes on a yellow legal pad, didn't react when I mentioned the dollar amounts, didn't flinch when I described the scheme. When I finished, she set down her pen. 10 years ago, she said quietly, my younger sister Emily met someone like Vance Sterling, charming, attentive, perfect on paper. They dated for 6 months. He convinced her to invest her life savings in a business opportunity he was developing. $40,000, everything she had. Melissa's jaw tightened. One morning, she woke up and he was gone. Money gone. Phone disconnected. The business never existed. She filed a police report. They opened an investigation, then it quietly closed. No explanation, no charges. She looked at the wall of case photos. 2 months later, my sister was dead. Pills and vodka. The shame destroyed her faster than the financial loss. She couldn't face what she'd trusted, what she'd believed, what she'd lost. The office fell silent. We both knew what it meant to watch someone you love walk into a trap you could see, but they couldn't. That's why I left Richmond PD, Melissa continued, because the system couldn't or wouldn't stop men like that. So I do it privately now, one case at a time. She pulled a contract from her desk drawer and pushed it across the table. I need full access, she said. Bank records, phone records, emails, anything you have on Vance Sterling. Anything Dr. Beck gave you. Anything you found on your own. I work fast, but I need everything. I signed without reading it. Melissa raised an eyebrow. Most clients ask about the fee before signing. This is my daughter. She nodded slowly. Then we don't have time to waste. I'll start with digital forensics phone records, financial transactions, the electronic trail he thinks he's hidden. These men are meticulous, but they're not perfect. There's always a crack somewhere. How long? I asked. It'll give me a week, maybe 10 days. I'll need to... My daughter is due in 3 weeks, I said. Maybe less. Melissa stopped. She's 9 months pregnant. Yes. And when the baby is born, Vance Sterling will demand a DNA test to prove it's not genetically his. Exactly. Then claim infidelity and invoke the prenup clause. Taking everything, $10.5 million total, plus whatever assets she's accumulated. Then he disappears. Melissa sat back in her chair, processing the timeline. 3 weeks, she said quietly. How do you build a case in 3 weeks when the predator has been planning for 6 years? I can move faster, Melissa said. Cut corners. Focus on the critical evidence, the IVF fraud, the medical records, the Boston connection. But if we rush and miss something, if there's a hole in what we build, a lawyer will drive a truck through it. But what's the alternative? I asked. We move fast and we're perfect. No mistakes, no gaps. Every piece of evidence documented, verified, legally obtained. We build something so airtight that when we present it to police, to lawyers, to whoever needs to see it, there's no room for doubt. Can that be done in 3 weeks? I don't know, she admitted. But I know what happens if we don't try. She opened her laptop, fingers already moving across the keyboard. One more thing, she said without looking up. If Vance Sterling realizes we're investigating, he'll accelerate his timeline. He'll spring the trap early before we're ready. So, we work quietly. No contact with Cassandra. No confrontation with Vance. No ripples. Understood. You said Dr. Beck gave you bank transfer records showing payments to Harper Finch. That's on. I pulled out the manila envelope and spread the documents across her desk. Prenup, medical records, bank statements. Melissa scanned them with the practiced eye of someone who'd reviewed thousands of case files. This is good, she said. This is a start, but we need more. We need to trace where Vance Sterling's money comes from, how he's been funding this operation. Whether he's done this before Boston, whether there are other victims. She looked up. 3 weeks, she repeated. Melissa closed her laptop and looked at me across the desk, cluttered with other people's tragedies. We'll need to move faster than he expects, she said quietly. And we'll need to be perfect because if Vance Sterling realizes we're investigating, he'll accelerate his timeline. The question hung between us, unspoken but understood. Could we expose 6 years of planning in less than a month? We had 21 days. Melissa promised she'd work faster than any investigator I'd ever seen. I believed her, had to believe her. The alternative was watching my daughter lose everything while I stood helpless. I didn't have to wait long. Friday morning, Melissa called with 2 words that would rewrite everything I thought I knew about the past 5 years. Data's in. I drove to her office in 20 minutes. Melissa was staring intensely at her monitors, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I started digging into Vance's digital footprint and communication logs, she said, turning a screen toward me. Look at this. He installed a high-end message spoofing software on both your phones 5 years ago. It explains the silence. And you thought she wanted nothing to do with you. Melissa's voice was gentle but firm. That's what Vance Sterling designed. Complete isolation, manufactured silence. He didn't just separate you physically, he made you both believe the other had chosen the separation. I thought of the nights I'd stood in Cassandra's empty bedroom, wondering what I'd done wrong. The Christmases I'd called her number, knowing she wouldn't answer, but trying anyway. The cards I'd sent that came back unopened. She'd been doing the same thing, reaching for me, while Vance Sterling's software swallowed every attempt. Can this be proven in court? I asked. With the carrier data and the software forensics, yes. It's documented, time-stamped, admissible. Melissa closed that screen and opened another. But there's more. She pulled up medical records. I recognized the Richmond Fertility Associates letterhead. Vance Sterling's patient file. Took some creative sourcing to get this, and I'd rather not explain how, but it's verified. She highlighted a diagnosis dated March 2020. Complete male infertility. Azoospermia. 0% sperm motility. Irreversible condition. Genetic cause. Documented 5 years ago. I leaned closer to the screen, reading the clinical language that spelled out medical certainty. Vance Sterling could never father a child naturally. Ever. The diagnosis was absolute. When did he suggest I VF to Cassandra? I asked, though some part of me already knew. Melissa checked her notes. September 2023, 3 years after this diagnosis, during which he pretended they were trying naturally. 6 months. He'd known for half a year that conception was impossible without a donor, had sat with that knowledge, had planned, had decided exactly how to weaponize it. He didn't want a child, Melissa said quietly. He wanted evidence, a baby whose genetics could be tested, a donor situation he controlled, proof he could manufacture and present as adultery. He used her dream of becoming a mother as the trap. Yes, I thought about Cassandra at 28, wanting children, trying naturally for years, while her husband secretly knew it was impossible, the hope that must have lit up when he suggested I IVF. the trust she must have felt that he was committed to building a family with her. He turned her hope into a weapon. First cycle failed, probably by design. Second cycle, Harper Finch swaps the donor sample per Vance's instructions. And the moment that child is born, I said, Vance demands a DNA test, proves the baby isn't genetically his, accuses Cassandra of infidelity, invokes the prenup clause. Taking everything, Melissa finished. The inheritance, the penalties, everything she has. We sat in silence in her small office surrounded by evidence of calculated cruelty. The message-spoofing software that had stolen 5 years of father-daughter communication. The medical diagnosis that Vance had hidden while pretending to share Cassandra's dream. The IVF process that was never about family-only fraud. She went through 2 years of thinking her body had failed her, I said quietly. Every month, every failed attempt, all of it theater he designed from the beginning. And she had no idea, Melissa said. She thought she was failing. He made sure of that. He'd taken her desire to become a mother and used it as the foundation of her destruction. Understanding cruelty and stopping it required different tools. Melissa and I now had the evidence of what Vance had done. We needed the evidence of how. That meant talking to the person whose guilt had been eating her alive for months. The parking lot behind the shuttered shopping mall was empty except for 2 cars and the weight of a confession that had been destroying someone for months. Harper Finch arrived 10 minutes before sunset. I watched her park 3 spaces away from my car engine, running for a full minute before she turned it off. When she finally stepped out, I understood why Dr. Beck had called her sister's condition critical. 30 years old with dark circles so deep they looked like bruises, trembling hands, the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying guilt you can't set down. She walked to my passenger door. I unlocked it. She got in without a word. "Mr. Vance," she said quietly, "your investigator said you wanted to hear it from me directly." "I do." Harper stared straight ahead through the windshield at the empty lot, the closed stores, the failing light. 10 months ago, Vance Sterling came to Richmond Fertility Specialists. I was working intake that day. He asked to speak with me, privately said it was sensitive. We went to one of the consultation rooms. Her voice was flat, clinical, like she'd rehearsed this 1,000 times in her head. He said his wife carried genetic risks, said he needed to protect their future child, said he wanted to use a different donor than what would be in the official records for privacy reasons for safety. He offered me money. "How much?" I asked. $120,000. She said the number without inflection. In 6 separate transfers over 18 months, 7,000, 10,000, 5,000, 15,000, 8,000, then 75,000 at the end. Why the separation? So it wouldn't trigger automatic bank reporting. He was careful, said he'd done this before, knew how to avoid attention. I filed that detail away. He'd done this before. Well, what did he want you to do? I asked, though I already knew. If they swap the sperm donor sample during your daughter's second IVF cycle, replace the designated donor's genetic material with a different sample he provided. Make sure the paperwork didn't reflect the change. Whose sample did you use? Lucas Thorne, a registered donor. Vance paid him $50,000 separately for his cooperation and silence. She finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were hollow. I was drowning in student debt. My mother needed surgery we couldn't afford. I told myself it was harmless, just switching one anonymous donor for another. The baby would still be healthy. Your daughter would still get what she wanted. But that's not why he wanted it done, I said. No, Harper's voice cracked. I didn't know about the prenup until 3 months ago. Vance came in for a follow-up consultation about the pregnancy timeline. He left his briefcase in the room. I was cleaning up and found a page that had fallen out. She pulled out her phone, showed me a photo she'd taken. A photocopy of page 7 from Cassandra's prenuptial agreement, the infidelity clause, the penalties, the inheritance forfeiture. That's when I understood what I'd done. I hadn't helped him protect a child. I'd helped him build a trap, a way to prove the baby wasn't genetically his so he could claim adultery, destroy your daughter's life, and take everything. Why didn't you come forward then? Because he'd already thought of that. She pulled up a text message on her phone. Show me the screen. From Vance Sterling's number, dated March 2025, if you speak out, you'll have nothing left to lose. Your license, your career, your freedom. Remember that. He threatened you, I said. Constantly. 47 messages over the past 10 months, reminders of what he'd done for me, warnings about what would happen if I talked, promises that it would all be over soon. Harper reached into the back seat and pulled out a cardboard box, set it on her lap. But 2 weeks ago, my sister Chloe called me, said she'd met with you, said your daughter was 9 months pregnant and running out of time. She asked me what kind of person I wanted to be when this was over. She opened the box. 6 months of bank statements with every deposit highlighted. Wire transfer receipts showing his name as sender, my name as recipient. And this. She handed me a USB drive. 47 text messages from his phone number. I kept screenshots of everything. The first one from last November. You just made the best decision of your life. The last one from 2 weeks ago. Just a little more. Then it's over. And all the threats in between. I watched Harper's face as she said it and understood the weight she had been carrying. The price of her silence had been her own soul, and she was here tonight to start paying it back. For Harper Finch, the price had been her soul, and she was here to pay it back. I'm going to lose my nursing license, she said quietly. Probably face criminal charges. I know that. I accept it. Then why come forward? Because your daughter is about to give birth. Harper's voice broke. She doesn't know what's waiting for her. She thinks she's bringing a baby into a loving family. She doesn't know her husband has been planning to destroy her for years. She doesn't know about the prenup trap or the DNA test or any of it. She pushed the box toward me. I can't stop what I've already done, but I can stop it from finishing. That's worth whatever happens to me. I took the box, felt the weight of it. Bank statements, wire transfers, 47 messages from Vance Sterling's own phone. The messages, Harper whispered. They're all there, dated, time-stamped, from his number, including the ones where he threatened me, where he talked about the plan, where he said. She stopped, unable to finish. I looked down at the evidence box in my hands. 6 months of financial records, wire transfer receipts with both names printed clearly, a USB drive containing 47 text messages from Vance Sterling's phone number. For the first time since this began, I held proof that couldn't be denied, couldn't be explained away. Direct evidence from Vance Sterling's own phone. That evidence went straight to Melissa. Sunday she'd reviewed the text messages. By Monday morning, she'd mapped every transaction they referenced. What she found made Harper's confession look small. Monday morning, Melissa had 3 monitors running simultaneously, each displaying a different layer of Vance Sterling's financial life, and what they revealed was worse than I'd imagined. Sit down, she said when I arrived, not a suggestion. I sat. I started with the bank transfers. Harper documented the payments Vance made to her. Then I traced backward, looking for where that money came from. That led me to your daughter's joint checking account, then to credit cards, then to something I didn't expect. She pulled up the First Monitor hotel records. Riverside Inn, twice a week for the past 8 months. Vance Sterling and his assistant Natalie Cross, 26 years old. Registry shows them checking in together, staying 2 to 3 hours checking out. An affair, I said. That's what it looks like. That's what Natalie probably thinks it is. Melissa switched to the second monitor. But this isn't about an affair. It's about money. Bank transaction logs filled the screen. Highlighted entries, dates, amounts, patterns. $1.5 million, Melissa said quietly. Moved from your daughter's joint account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Over 18 months, 73 separate transfers. I leaned forward. Through Natalie's personal checking account. She's serving as the conduit, what financial crimes investigators call a money mule. Vance deposits funds into her account. She transfers them offshore, probably thinking she's helping with some business arrangement he's explained to her. Each transfer under $25,000, I said, recognizing the pattern. Exactly, the federal reporting threshold. Anything $25,000 or higher triggers automatic IRS notification. Vance kept every single transfer below that line. 73 transactions, 18 months, each one precisely calculated to stay invisible. Melissa pulled up phone records. Text messages between them show Natalie has no awareness she's committing a federal felony. She thinks the relationship is genuine. She thinks the financial transactions are legitimate business. Meanwhile, Vance is systematically draining your daughter's assets and moving them beyond legal reach. I stared at the numbers. 73 transfers, $1.5 million, laundered through a 26-year-old woman who believed she was in a relationship. Does Natalie know about the prenup trap? I asked. No evidence she does. She's a victim too, just a different kind. Melissa switched to the third monitor. But there's more. I ran Vance Sterling's credit reports, bank statements, and transaction history going back 3 years. Found something that explains the desperation behind all of this. The screen showed gambling websites, online sports betting platforms, private poker game ledgers. $650,000 in gambling debts, Melissa said, accumulated over 3 years. Online betting private poker games with very dangerous people. He's been losing consistently, borrowing from progressively worse sources to cover previous losses. She pulled up another window. And to cover those gambling debts, he's been embezzling from his own clients. He works as an asset manager, handles investment accounts for retirees' families, people who trusted him with their life savings. The spreadsheet showed client names I didn't recognize, amounts ranging from $1,000 to $3,000. Transaction after transaction. $250,000 total, Melissa continued. Stolen over 18 months, small amounts at a time. 1,000 here, 3,000 there, just below the thresholds that would trigger compliance reviews. He's been stealing from people who can't afford to lose it. She leaned back in her chair. Added up. 1.5 million moved offshore. 650,000 in gambling debts still owed. 250,000 embezzled from clients. Plus, the money he paid, Harper paid Lucas Thorne, paid for the fake journalist, calls paid for the message spoofing software. Total damage, I asked. Nearly $3 million spent lost or illegally transferred. And he still owes $650,000 to creditors who don't forgive debt. I sat with that number. He was not just greedy, he was drowning. And somewhere along the way, he had decided my daughter was the lifeline that would pull him back to the surface. Nearly $3 million spent lost or illegally transferred, and he still owes $650,000 to creditors who don't forgive debt. Some of these people, Melissa pointed to names in the poker ledger, are the kind who break bones first and ask questions later. I understood then, really understood. Your daughter's $8 million inheritance isn't about greed, Melissa said. It's about survival. Vance Sterling is a desperate man who's been losing for years. He owes dangerous people. He's embezzled from clients who will eventually notice. He's committed federal crimes through Natalie that will surface. She closed the monitors one by one. At the prenup trap, the IVF fraud, the message, spoofing the 6-year plan, none of it was about being evil. It was about being desperate. He built this elaborate scheme because he's drowning in debt and legal exposure, and the only thing standing between him and complete destruction is your family's wealth. So he married my daughter to save himself, I said. He married your daughter to buy his life back. The $8 million covers his debts, lets him disappear to a country without extradition, starts over somewhere his creditors and his victims can't reach him. I thought about Cassandra, 9 months pregnant, in love with a man who'd seen her as a transaction from the first handshake, who'd calculated her value down to the dollar before ever asking her to dinner. How much time do we have? I asked. Your daughter's due date is in 2.5 weeks, maybe sooner. The moment that baby is born, Vance will demand the DNA test. If we're not ready with everything, evidence, legal strategy, protection for Cassandra, he wins. I stared at Melissa's final calculation on screen. 2.9 million in total damage. 650,000 owed to people who don't forgive. An $8 million inheritance standing between Vance Sterling and whatever those creditors do to gamblers who can't pay. He wasn't an evil genius. He was a desperate man who'd bet everything and lost, and now he was using my daughter as his final chip. Understanding that Vance was desperate didn't make stopping him easier. It made him more dangerous. A drowning man will pull anyone under to save himself. Tuesday morning, I needed legal weapons to match the financial evidence Melissa had compiled, which meant putting the prenup under a microscope that could find what Vance Sterling had missed. Dorothy Fleming's law office occupied a restored Victorian building in downtown Richmond. Mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling law books. The kind of place that had witnessed generations of family disputes and knew how to dismantle them. Dorothy herself was 58, with steel-gray hair pulled into a precise bun. 30 years practicing family law in Virginia. She could spot a predatory prenup within 3 pages. I handed her the document Cassandra had signed. She read in silence for 10 minutes, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When she looked up, her expression was grim. This prenup was drafted by Marcus Thornhill of Thornhill and Associates, she said. I know his work. He's meticulous, expensive, the kind of lawyer you hire when you want something that will hold up under aggressive challenge. What's wrong with it? Nothing's wrong with it from a technical perspective. That's what makes it dangerous. She flipped to page 7. But I recognized his firm's name, so I checked my records. Marcus Thornhill's office called your old law practice in October 2018. Asked detailed questions about estate planning for traditional Virginia families with generational wealth. Specifically inquired about legal structures for properties held in family trusts for 5+ generations. I felt cold understanding settle over me. That description matches your family's estate exactly, Dorothy continued. But the call was made in October 2018. Vance didn't meet Cassandra until April 2019, I said quietly. Exactly. He had a lawyer researching your family's legal structure a full year before the introduction, before the charity gala, before the first date. This wasn't opportunistic fraud. This was premeditated from the legal foundation up. The trap he'd spent 6 years building had a flaw he'd never noticed, and that flaw was our only advantage. Dorothy turned back to the prenup. You've already read page 7, she said. But did you notice the subclause at the bottom right corner, small print? She pointed. Section 4.2 contains a self-defeating condition. This clause shall be valid and enforceable only if the plaintiff can provide medical documentation proving fertility at the time of contract signing. She looked up. When did Vance sign this? April 2020, I said, according to the date on the signature page right before the wedding. And when was he diagnosed with complete infertility? March 2020, 1 month earlier. Dorothy set the prenup down on her desk. Then this entire clause, the infidelity provision, the $2.5 million penalty, the inheritance forfeiture, all of it has zero legal effect. The contract explicitly requires the plaintiff to prove fertility at signing. Vance Sterling was medically documented as 100% infertile when he executed this agreement. So the trap doesn't work, I said. The trap never worked. Either Vance didn't read the fine print Thornhill included, or he didn't understand its legal implications. He built his 6-year plan on a foundation that doesn't exist. I felt something close to relief. Not complete, Vance could still cause damage, could still hurt Cassandra, even without the prenup. But this was leverage. This was a weapon. Can we use this in court? I asked. Absolutely. The moment Vance tries to invoke the paternity clause, we present his medical records from March 2020. The clause self-destructs. But legal protection wasn't enough. We needed criminal consequences, which meant involving the FBI. The name Melissa gave me was Agent Brooks' Financial Crimes Division. His voice on the call was the voice of someone who had spent decades watching men like Vance Sterling believe they were untouchable. Mr. Vance, Brooks said when the line connected. Ms. Crawford briefed me on the situation. I need to tell you we've had Vance Sterling on our radar for 6 months. Suspected embezzlement from his asset management clients. But we didn't have enough evidence for warrants. If what you're describing is accurate, we can move immediately. Everything can be documented, I said. Bank statements, wire transfers, text messages from his phone, witness testimony. What's the timeline for building a federal case? Melissa asked. Brooks was silent for a moment. 8 weeks minimum, he said finally. You're talking about international accounts, fake passport, multiple jurisdictions. We need to coordinate with Cayman Islands. Authorities verify the offshore transfers, build a chain of evidence that will hold in federal court. If we rush it and leave holes, he walks. How do you build an 8-week case in 3 weeks when the stakes are a newborn child and $8 million? My daughter is due to give birth in 3 weeks, I said. Maybe sooner. The silence on the line was heavy. Then we have a problem, Brooks said quietly. If we open an investigation now, we need to move carefully. Vance Sterling is sophisticated. If he detects surveillance phone taps, financial monitoring witness interviews, he'll run. You mentioned a fake passport and tickets to Brazil. Purchased 6 weeks ago, Melissa confirmed. Then he has an exit strategy ready. The moment he realizes we're coming, he disappears. We'll never extradite him from Brazil. But if you wait, I said, the baby arrives. Vance demands a DNA test. Even if the prenup clause fails, he can still claim abandonment, file for custody, drag Cassandra through legal hell for years. I understand the dilemma, Brooks said, but federal prosecution requires time. We're talking about wire fraud, money laundering, embezzlement, conspiracy. This isn't a local police matter. It's a complex financial crime spanning multiple jurisdictions. Melissa looked at me across the desk. "And so what do we do?" she asked. "You have two options," Brooks said. "Rush the investigation, risk him fleeing before we can arrest him, lose any chance at prosecution, or build the case properly, knowing the baby might arrive before we're ready." I sat in the library after Brooks disconnected the impossible equation written in front of me. 8 weeks to build a case that would hold in federal court. 3 weeks until my daughter gave birth and Vance Sterling's trap became real. Melissa looked at me across the desk. "There's no way to do both," she said quietly. "We'd have to choose perfection or speed, and either choice could destroy everything." The impossible choice, perfection or speed, turned out not to be a choice at all. Because while Melissa and I debated timelines, new evidence arrived that changed everything. I drove to Crawford Investigations as soon as she called. "DHS flagged a passport application 3 months ago," Melissa said, pulling up the file on her monitor. "Part of their routine fraud monitoring. Name on the application, Robert Mitchell." She turned the screen toward me. The photo showed Vance Sterling's face, unmistakably him. Same dark eyes, same calculated smile, different name. "Issued through a document fraud network," Melissa continued. "Professional quality, would pass inspection at most international checkpoints, cost him probably $15,000. "When does he plan to use it?" I asked. She pulled up a second document, airline reservation. "He's giving himself time," I said. "Exactly. Baby arrives late May. He executes the DNA test, proves it's not genetically his, invokes the prenup, claims the inheritance liquidates whatever he can access. Then, 4 weeks later, he disappears before the legal system can respond. One-way ticket, no return. He never planned to stay for the child he'd spent 6 years creating. He's not going to raise that baby," Melissa said. "He was never going to raise it. The child was always just the mechanism." I stared at the screen. Fake passport, one-way ticket. A man who'd spent 6 years building a family only to destroy it for money and vanish to another hemisphere. June 30th becomes his deadline. I said, "Everything has to happen before then, which means we have until late May to stop him, when the baby arrives and he makes his move." The evidence was mounting, but we needed everything documented, organized, ready for prosecution or confrontation or whatever this became. Monday evening, Harper Finch texted that she had something to deliver. I drove back to the same parking lot. She was already waiting beside her car, holding a cardboard archive box, not the manila folder from our first meeting, but something far more substantial. "I spent the week organizing everything," she said, setting it on the hood of my car. "I knew if I was going to do this, I had to do it in a form prosecutors could actually use." She opened the box. Everything I'd seen in fragments before was now arranged in a federal evidence package: bank statements, organized chronologically with highlighted deposits, wire transfer receipts with full account identification, and the 47 text messages archived both in print and on a USB drive. A summary index at the front, color-coded tabs. "I called a lawyer," she said. "He told me how to organize it properly. I looked at the index, everything documented, everything dated, everything ready." "Oh, will you testify?" I asked. "Yes, wherever you need me." I took the box. The difference between the first meeting and this one was not the information I already knew what was inside. The difference was that now it was ready for a courtroom. Conscience sometimes arrives late, but when it comes with 47 pieces of evidence, it changes everything. "You know what this means for your career," I said. "I know. I'll lose my nursing license, probably face criminal charges, federal conspiracy, wire fraud, whatever they decide to charge me with." She looked at me steadily. "But your daughter is 9 months pregnant. She doesn't know her husband has been planning to destroy her for 6 years. She doesn't know about the fake DNA results or the offshore accounts or the Brazil ticket." Harper closed the box. "That matters more than my nursing license. She's about to give birth to a child conceived through fraud I committed. The least I can do is help stop the man who paid me to do it." She pushed the box toward me. "Everything's in there: bank records, wire transfers, text messages, timeline. I even included the consultation room records showing when Vance scheduled appointments, when he was alone with me, when the payments aligned with the IVF cycles." "Will you testify?" I asked. "Yes, in front of the FBI, in court, wherever you need me. I'll tell them everything I did and why I did it and who paid me to do it." I took the box, felt the weight of it. 6 months of documented conspiracy. 47 messages from Vance Sterling's own phone. Complete evidence archive prepared by someone who understood she was destroying her own life to save someone else's. The baby shower is in 13 days, I said. Harper nodded. Then you don't have much time. I drove back to the mansion with Harper's evidence box in the passenger seat and Melissa's DHS printouts in my briefcase. Fake passport, Brazil ticket, 47 text messages, 6 months of wire transfers. We had everything we needed to prove Vance Sterling's conspiracy. The baby shower was 13 days away. 13 days to decide whether we waited for the FBI's 8-week timeline or moved now with what we had. 13 days to choose between building a perfect federal case and protecting my daughter before it was too late. 13 days until everything came to a head. Those 13 days started moving faster than I wanted. We had the evidence. We had the timeline. What we didn't have was certainty about whether Vance suspected we were coming for him. The answer arrived Thursday afternoon. I heard the doorbell ring and looked through the window to see the man who'd spent 6 years planning to destroy my family standing on my porch holding white roses. Vance Sterling, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Perfect smile, warm eyes that didn't reach the calculation behind them. I opened the door. "Mr. Vance," he said, extending the bouquet. "I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but with the baby coming soon, I thought it was time we put the past behind us for Cassandra's sake. 30 years in federal courtrooms taught me how to keep my face calm when my blood was boiling." "That's thoughtful of you," I said, taking the flowers. "Please come in. Can I make you some tea?" His smile widened. "I'd like that." I led him to the living room, made tea from my grandmother's china service, poured carefully. Sat across from the man who'd orchestrated a 6-year conspiracy and pretended we were family. We talked for 40 minutes. On the surface it was pleasant, cordial. He asked about my health. I asked about Cassandra's pregnancy. We discussed potential baby names, weather, post-birth plans. All the small talk that people who don't trust each other use to fill silence. But I watched his eyes. They moved constantly, scanning the room, taking in details, the antique furniture, the family portraits on the walls, the grandfather clock in the corner, the bookshelves. He was cataloging, assessing, calculating value the way he had at the charity gala 6 years ago. "Family is so important," Vance said, setting down his teacup, "especially now with the baby coming. I'm glad we had this opportunity to reconnect before everything changes." "I couldn't agree more," I said. He stood to leave, shook my hand. The grip was firm, confident, the grip of someone who thought he was winning. "Thank you for the tea and for hearing me out." "Of course." I walked him to the door, watched his black Audi pull out of the circular driveway, watched until the taillights disappeared down the tree-lined road. Then I pulled out my phone and called Melissa. "He just left," I said. "Come now." She arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a black case I didn't recognize. "RF scanner," she said, opening it to reveal equipment that looked like something from a spy movie. "Radio frequency detector. If he planted listening devices, this will find them." "You think he bugged my house during a 40-minute tea conversation?" "I think a man who spent 6 years planning this doesn't make courtesy calls." She was right. Melissa started in the living room where we'd sat, moved the scanner slowly across the furniture, the walls, the decorations. The device stayed silent until she reached the air vent near the ceiling. "Beep." "Here," she said quietly. "Living room vent, professional grade." She continued through the house. Kitchen beep behind the coffee maker, library beep inside my desk lamp, hallway beep behind the family portrait frame, master bedroom beep behind the mirror, small study beep in the bookshelf. 6 devices total. Melissa laid them out on the library table. Tiny, professional, voice-activated. "These are high-end surveillance equipment," she said, her face pale. "Probably activated by sound transmit to a remote receiver, range of several hundred feet. He's been listening to everything." "How long have they been here?" I asked. "Could have been installed today during the visit. Could have been placed weeks ago by someone with access to the house. Either way, they're live now." I stared at the 6 tiny devices. Thought about every conversation Melissa and I had in this house over the past 2 weeks, with Dorothy, with Agent Brooks on speakerphone, every plan we'd discussed, every strategy we'd developed. "He's heard everything," Melissa said quietly. "Every conversation about the evidence, about Harper's testimony, about the FBI timeline. He knows we're investigating him. What's the advantage in knowing your enemy is listening? You control what he hears. Leave them where they are, I said. Melissa looked at me like I'd lost my mind. What? Put every single one back, exactly where they were. Garrison, if these stay active, he'll hear everything we... That's the point, I interrupted. He wants to listen. Fine, let's give him something to hear. Understanding dawned across her face. You want to run a disinformation campaign, she said slowly. Make him think he's winning. If Vance believes we're struggling, believes the investigation is failing, believes he has time, he stays. He doesn't flee to Brazil early. He doesn't change his plans. He gets comfortable. And comfortable men make mistakes. Exactly. Melissa picked up the first device, the one from the living room vent, turned it over in her hands. What do we feed him? She asked. Doubt, frustration, dead ends. We stage conversations about how the evidence isn't strong enough, how the FBI needs more time we don't have, how Harper's testimony might not hold up, how we're running out of options. Make him think the trap is failing before it can spring. Make him think he's won. Melissa looked at the 6 devices, then at me. This is dangerous. If he realizes we're playing him, he won't, because we're not going to overplay it. Just enough doubt, just enough apparent weakness, enough to keep him here, keep him confident, keep him following his original timeline instead of accelerating. She carefully replaced the first device in the living room vent, then the second in the kitchen, the third in the library lamp, the fourth behind the portrait, the fifth behind the bedroom mirror, the sixth in the study bookshelf. When she was done, she looked at me with something close to admiration. You want to make him think he's winning, she said. I nodded. Vance Sterling thought surveillance gave him power, thought listening to our conversations put him ahead of the game. Making Vance think he knew our moves meant giving him a performance worth believing. Monday evening, Melissa and I prepared our script. We sat in the library, the room with the listening device hidden inside the desk lamp. Melissa had her laptop open case files spread across the table. We both knew Vance was listening somewhere, probably in his car or home office headphones on recording every word. Time to give him what he wanted to hear. I'm worried we're missing something. I said loud enough for the device, but natural enough to sound unrehearsed. The forensic timeline doesn't line up the way I thought it would. Melissa played her part perfectly. What do you mean? The IVF records. The dates Harper gave us, are we sure we interpreted them correctly? What if the second cycle wasn't when the swap happened? You think we got the timeline wrong? I rubbed my face, performing exhaustion. I don't know. I thought I understood the medical documentation. But now I'm second-guessing everything. Every sentence was calculated theater. Every pause is deliberate. What about the prenup? Melissa asked. Dorothy said the fertility clause invalidates it. Maybe. Or maybe we're reading too much into fine print that won't hold up in court. I've seen contracts with similar language upheld despite technicalities. So you're reconsidering the legal strategy. I'm reconsidering whether we have enough. The FBI says 8 weeks. Cassandra gives birth in less than 3. We're running out of time, and we don't have all the pieces. Melissa shuffled papers. The financial transfers, are they enough? Vance could claim those were legitimate business transactions. Harper could recant her testimony under pressure. The passport authentication. What if the documents Homeland Security flagged aren't actually his on Basir? I watched my reflection in the library window. Former federal prosecutor who'd spent 30 years building cases, now performing doubt about evidence I knew was airtight. The role reversal created a strange cognitive dissonance. But Vance was listening, and he needed to believe we were failing. Maybe we need to consider a settlement, I said quietly. Talk to Cassandra. See if there's a way to resolve this without destroying the family. You're serious, Melissa said. I'm tired, and I'm not sure we can win this in the time we have left. The performance was complete. Doubt, frustration, defeated exhaustion, wrong dates, incorrect financial amounts, fabricated uncertainty about passport forensics. Vance Sterling would hear exactly what made him dangerous. Confirmation that his plan was working, that we were scrambling, that he had time. Melissa and I sat in silence for another minute. Then she closed her laptop. Good, she whispered, too quiet for the device. I nodded. We'd planted the seeds. Now we waited to see if Vance would get comfortable enough to stay, instead of running. Tuesday evening, my phone rang. Agent Brooks. Mr. Vance, he said. Something's happened. Something significant. I put him on speaker, walking to my study, the room, without a listening device. What is it? 3 hours ago, Natalie Cross walked into the Richmond FBI field office, alone, asked to speak with someone about financial crimes and Vance Sterling. I sat down. What? She brought evidence. Recordings of Vance discussing the offshore accounts with her. Text messages about timing the IVF fraud. Financial records showing the transfers through her personal account. She's terrified. Wants immunity in exchange for testimony. He used her, I said. She knows that now. Said she thought he loved her. Thought the financial arrangements were legitimate business. Then she found documents in his car 2 days ago, printouts about the Brazil tickets notes, about liquidating assets, timeline calculations. She realized she was being set up to take the fall for money laundering. Will she testify? She already started, gave us 3 hours of recorded statement. Her cooperation fills every remaining gap in the case. We have motive, means opportunity, and now intent testimony from someone he confided in. I felt something shift, something I had been holding tense for weeks. What's the timeline? I asked. 48 hours, maybe less. The passport fraud analyst confirmed the Robert Mitchell documents are forgeries. Natalie provides the direct evidence of intent we needed. We can move for arrest within 2 days. We didn't recruit her. She recruited herself. The performance Melissa and I had staged in the library would keep Vance complacent. He'd heard us doubt the evidence question the timeline considers settlement. He'd think he was winning, while the FBI closed the net around him. The disinformation worked, I said. Keep it up, Brooks replied. If Vance suspects we're moving, he could flee early. The Brazil ticket is for June, but he has the passport now. We need him comfortable until we're ready. Understood. Your daughter's baby shower is this weekend, correct? When the school departments disposed. Saturday. That gives us 5 days. We'll be ready. After Brooks hung up, I sat in silence holding the phone. Thought about Cassandra at 29, standing in some lawyer's office signing a prenuptial agreement Vance had engineered. Unknowingly pregnant with an IVF embryo she'd never consented to. Trusting the man who was building her destruction. The rage that had fueled my investigation for weeks. The cold fury that had driven me through late nights of evidence review, through meetings with terrified witnesses, through watching my daughter's marriage, knowing what hid beneath it, that rage transformed into something steadier. Certainty. Justice was close enough to touch now, not abstract, not eventual. 48 hours. I called Melissa. Brooks just called, I said. Natalie Cross went to the FBI 3 hours ago. Brought recordings, texts, financial records. Wants immunity for testimony. She flipped, Melissa said quietly. She flipped, and Brooks says they can arrest him in 48 hours. Everything's in place. Silence on the line. Then Melissa laughed short, slightly disbelieving. We're actually going to win this, she said. I heard the certainty in my own voice when I answered. Yes, we are. For the first time since finding that prenup 6 weeks ago, I allowed myself to believe it. With Natalie Cross's cooperation secured by the FBI, the countdown to Saturday's baby shower felt real. It was time to make the call I had avoided for 5 years. Wednesday evening, 2 days before the baby shower, I sat in my library staring at my phone contact list, scrolled to the name I'd saved 1,825 days ago. Cassandra, daughter. I pressed call. 3 rings. My heart hammered. Then her voice. It's Dad. Not hostile. Not cold. Cautious, yes, but underneath the caution, hope. Dad, is that really you? Sweetheart, I said, and my voice cracked on the word. I've missed you every single day. Silence, then a soft sob. I miss you too, Dad. We talked for 20 minutes. Not about Vance, not about the investigation or the evidence or the conspiracy I'd uncovered. Just about her, about the baby, about the name she'd chosen Evelyn after her grandmother, about her plans for the nursery, about whether she was scared or excited, or both. I want to host the baby shower, I said, at the mansion, the way Grandma used to do for the family. Another pause. You do that? Of course, it's your home. It's always been your home. I'd like that, she said quietly. I'd really like that. When we hung up, I sat in the library feeling something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Not just hope, connection. Thursday morning, I drove to meet her at a cafe near the river. Arrived early, waited. She walked in 9 months pregnant, wearing a blue dress hair longer than I remembered. When she saw me, she stopped. Just stopped in the middle of the cafe and stared. Then she started crying. I stood. She walked over, didn't say anything, just stepped into my arms. First hug in 5 years. She was warm and solid and very, very pregnant. My grandchild was right there between us, a presence I'd never felt before. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered. "For all of it, for the wedding, for the silence, for everything." "You don't need to apologize for anything," I said. We sat, ordered coffee decaf for her, talked about becoming a grandfather, about her childhood at the mansion, about memories from before everything broke. She asked if I was okay, really okay. I watched her face, 29 years old, 9 months pregnant, asking if I was okay. And I realized I'd missed the entire pregnancy. Every kick, every ultrasound, every moment of wonder and fear and anticipation. But she was here now. That had to be enough. "I'm okay," I said. "I'm preparing to be a grandfather. That's the best I've been in years." She smiled, reached across the table and took my hand. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Really okay?" Her smile faltered for just a second. "I think so. It's been complicated, but the baby's healthy. That's what matters." I wanted to tell her everything right then, about Vance, about the trap, about the FBI moving in tomorrow, but the cafe was public, the timing was wrong, and she looked so peaceful sitting there with her hand on her belly that I couldn't bear to shatter it yet. 24 more hours, then she'd know everything. Before I tell you what Cassandra discovered that evening, the detail that would force my hand, I need to ask, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think she should have been told immediately, or B, if waiting was the right call. Add one reason in 5 to 10 words so I can understand your thinking, because what happens next changes the timeline completely. Please note some details ahead are adapted for narrative flow, but the emotional truth is what matters. If dramatized storytelling isn't for you, you're free to stop here. Thursday evening, Cassandra was alone in her apartment. Vance was at a business meeting, or so he'd said. She was reviewing their joint bank account statement, something she did monthly, keeping track of expenses as the baby's arrival approached. That's when she saw them. Small transfers, dozens of them, over 18 months. Amounts ranging from $1,000 to $3,000, all going to accounts she didn't recognize. She stared at the statement, tried to remember authorizing any of these transactions. Couldn't. She called the bank. "This is Cassandra Sterling. I'm looking at my joint account statement and I see transfers I don't remember making. Can you verify whether I authorized these?" The employee checked the records. "No, ma'am, these transactions were all initiated from the secondary account holder. You didn't authorize any of them." Cassandra sat very still. "It's how much total?" she asked. "Over the 18-month period shown here, approximately $47,000. She thanked the employee and hung up, sat in her apartment in silence, 9 months pregnant, looking at evidence that her husband had been secretly moving their money without her knowledge for a year and a half. She called me. "Dad," she said. Her voice was different, careful. "Can you tell me the truth about something?" I checked the clock. Thursday evening, baby shower, tomorrow afternoon. FBI arrest timeline, 48 hours. "What do you need to know?" I asked. "Is there something wrong with Vance, with our marriage, with anything I should know about Bustikstemald? In Bolms, she'd found something. I didn't know what, but she'd found something." "Cassandra, please, Dad, just tell me the truth." I wanted to lay out everything right there on the phone. The IVF fraud, the offshore accounts, the fake passport, the 6-year plan to destroy her. But the baby shower was tomorrow. The FBI was moving in. And if I told her now, if she confronted Vance, if anything changed his behavior before we were ready. 24 hours, I said. "Please trust me for 24 more hours. After the shower tomorrow, I'll tell you everything. But right now, I need you to act like nothing's wrong. Can you do that for me?" Silence on the line. "You know something," she said. "I know everything, and I promise you'll know it too. 24 hours. Another pause. "Okay," she whispered. 24 hours. I hung up and stood at the library window, looking out at the mansion grounds where my grandchild would grow up. Tomorrow the baby shower happened. Tomorrow the FBI closed in. Tomorrow Cassandra learned everything. 24 hours to protect them both through what came next. Those 24 hours moved like water through my hands. Friday night became Saturday morning, became afternoon, before I was ready. But ready or not, the baby shower was happening, and everything we'd built had to work perfectly. Friday midnight, 4 people sat in the mansion library: the lawyer, the investigator, the FBI agent, and me. Dorothy Fleming spread the prenup across the table one final time. This is void, she said with absolute certainty. Fertility fraud, at signing negates every term. The moment Vance tries to invoke the paternity clause, we present his March 2020 infertility diagnosis. The contract self-destructs. And if he doesn't invoke it, Melissa asked. He will, I said. That's his entire plan. He needs the DNA test to prove infidelity. Without it, he has nothing. Agent Brooks pulled up a diagram on his laptop. 3 agents in catering uniforms. They'll arrive with the actual waitstaff at noon. 2 local officers at the front gate posing as security. All armed, all ready. What's the sequence? Dorothy asked. Brooks ticked through it like a military operation. Vance initiates the DNA test, probably around mid-afternoon when the party's in full swing and he has maximum audience. Garrison refutes the accusation, point by point. Then witnesses testify. Harper Finch first. She confesses to the IVF fraud and names Vance as the one who paid her, Lucas Thorne. Second, he confirms he was the sperm donor, and Vance paid him for silence. Valerie DuPont. Third, she identifies Vance as the man who stole from her in Boston 8 years ago. And then, I announced the arrest, federal charges, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, embezzlement. He'll be in handcuffs before he understands what's happening. Every piece perfectly coordinated. Prenup void, arrest warrant ready, FBI agents in disguise, witnesses rehearsed. Tomorrow my daughter gets her life back, I said quietly. The meeting broke up around 1 in the morning. Melissa and Dorothy left together. Brooks stayed behind for a final security review. When he left, I sat alone in the library looking at framed photos on the wall. Cassandra at 5, riding her first bike in the garden. At 10, climbing the oak tree. At 16, dressed for prom, before Vance Sterling, before the estrangement, before everything broke. Tomorrow we'd try to put it back together. Saturday arrived too fast and too slow. The catering company set up white tents across the mansion lawn at 10 in the morning, blue tablecloths, flowers everywhere. String lights wound through the oak trees. By noon, it looked like something from a wedding magazine. 50 guests started arriving at 2. High society. Virginia families I'd known for decades. People who'd attended my wife's funeral sent condolences when Cassandra stopped speaking to me, probably gossiped about the estrangement over country club lunches. Today they'd witnessed something none of them expected. I stood near the mansion steps watching them arrive, smiled, shook hands, accepted congratulations on becoming a grandfather, and watched Agent Brooks position himself near the cake table. Black suit, small earpiece barely visible. He looked like any other security contractor hired for a high-end event. But I knew he had a weapon under that jacket and 2 backup agents working the catering stations. 2:15 Vance Sterling arrived. Black Audi. Passenger door opened. Cassandra stepped out 9 months pregnant in a cream-colored dress. And Vance came around to take her arm. Perfect smile. Protective hand on her back. The model husband guiding his pregnant wife through a celebration of their growing family. Performance for a final audience. They walked into the garden together. Guests surrounded them. Congratulations, questions about the due date, predictions about whether it would be early or late. Vance worked the crowd like a politician, warm, charming, grateful. His eyes found mine across the courtyard. He smiled, nodded slightly. I nodded back. Both of us knew the performance ended today. Cassandra caught my eye and mouthed, "Later." I nodded. Later, after this was over. After Vance was in handcuffs, and the truth was public, and she understood everything. Later. The party flowed into the afternoon. String quartet played Vivaldi under the oak trees. Champagne bubbles caught October sunlight. Guests laughed over petit four and finger sandwiches. And 3 FBI agents in waiter uniforms moved between tables with trained precision. Cassandra opened gifts, blankets, toys, a handmade crib from one of my wife's old friends. She smiled and thanked everyone, looked tired but happy. Did she remember the bank statement? The unauthorized transfers she'd discovered. Thursday night I'd asked for 24 hours of trust. She was giving it to me. But I saw her glance at Vance occasionally with something in her eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. Doubt. 3:15. The party was in full swing. Maximum audience. Perfect timing. Vance Sterling set down his champagne glass, straightened his jacket, walked to the center of the tent, tapped his glass 3 times with a knife. The clear ringing sound cut through the conversation. The string quartet stopped mid-phrase. 50 guests turned toward him. He smiled at Cassandra first. Then his eyes moved across the crowd to find me. Thank you all for being here today, he said, his voice carried across the tent with practiced ease. Cassandra and I are so grateful to celebrate this moment with the people we love most. Guests murmured appreciation. But before we continue, Vance said, I want to do something special, something I've been planning for a while, something that I think will make this day even more meaningful. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small blue box. I knew what it was before he opened it. So did Agent Brooks. I saw him shift position slightly, hand moving closer to his weapon. Vance held up the box for everyone to see. This, he said, is a paternity test kit. And today in front of all of you, I want to publicly confirm the most important thing in our lives, that this child we're about to welcome is ours. Truly, genetically, completely ours. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cassandra's face went pale. Vance looked directly at me, smiled. I have an announcement that will change everything. Vance Sterling's voice carried across the silent tent with practiced warmth. I want to do something special today, he said, holding up the small blue box so everyone could see it. Something I've been planning for months, something that will make this celebration even more meaningful. He opened the box with theatrical precision. Inside sat a DNA paternity test kit, the kind you could buy at any pharmacy, sterile swabs in sealed packaging, collection tubes, laboratory submission forms. And this, Vance announced, is a paternity test. And today in front of all of you, our friends, our family, the people we love most, I want to publicly confirm what we all know in our hearts, that this baby, this miraculous child we're about to welcome, is genetically completely undeniably ours. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. I watched the guests' faces, saw the questions forming. Why would he need to prove paternity at his own child's baby shower? What was he implying? What kind of announcement was this? But I wasn't watching the guests. I was watching Cassandra. She stood 10 feet from her husband, 9 months pregnant in her cream dress, staring at the DNA test kit in his hand. Her face had gone pale. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, protective, uncertain. And for the first time in 6 years, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen when she looked at Vance Sterling. Doubt. Today we celebrate not just a baby. Vance continued, his voice growing more confident with each word. We celebrate the miracle of our family, the miracle of science that helped us conceive, the miracle of love that brought us to this moment. He pulled one of the sterile swabs from the kit. I've brought this DNA test to publicly confirm what we all know, that this child is ours, genetically mine, genetically Cassandra's. A child created through the IVF process we went through together 2 years ago. A woman near me whispered to her husband, why would he need to prove that at a baby shower? Das puren. En mastidi davimol ko. Vance heard her, smiled. I know this might seem unusual, he said, but in a world where family is questioned, where legitimacy is challenged, where even the most sacred bonds can be doubted, I want there to be no question, no uncertainty. No room for anyone to suggest that this child, this family, is anything other than exactly what it appears to be. He looked directly at me. Isn't that right, Garrison? 50 pairs of eyes turned my direction. I saw what Vance was doing, saw the trap he thought he was springing. In his mind, this was checkmate, public humiliation. He'd revealed that the baby wasn't genetically, his claim Cassandra had been unfaithful, invoked the prenup clause before 50 witnesses who could never unsee what they'd witnessed. He thought I'd brought Cassandra here to defend her, to plead, to beg him not to destroy her publicly. He had no idea I'd brought him here to watch his own destruction. I watched Cassandra's face as she stared at the DNA test kit in her husband's hand. Saw the exact moment 6 years of trust began to crack, doubt entering her eyes like slow poison. She discovered the unauthorized bank transfers Thursday night, asked me for truth. I'd asked for 24 hours. Now she was getting it. Cassandra, Vance said gently, would you like to do the honors? Take the swab. We can send this to the laboratory together. Prove to everyone, to your father, to our friends, to anyone who's ever questioned our family, that this child is ours. Cassandra's voice came out strained, small. Vance, what are you doing? Protecting our family, he said. Protecting you, protecting our child from anyone who might suggest otherwise. Who would suggest otherwise? She asked. Vance's smile never wavered. You know your father and I have had our differences. I just want to put any doubts to rest, publicly, permanently. The tent held 50 people, but sounded like cathedral silence. No champagne glasses clinking, no whispered conversations. Only Vance's confident breathing and the rustle of blue packaging as he held the DNA kit. This was the moment he'd been building toward for 6 years. The public trap, the humiliation, the prenup clause that would give him everything. Except he'd made one critical miscalculation. He thought I'd come to defend my daughter. I'd come to destroy him. I set down my champagne glass. The crystal touched the table with a quiet click that carried across the silent tent. Stood. 50 pairs of eyes pivoted from Vance Sterling to me. Vance's expression shifted, not to worry, not to fear, to curiosity. He thought he understood what was happening, thought my standing was a defensive reaction, the father rising to protect his daughter from public accusation, the old man making a scene to disrupt the carefully planned revelation. He looked at me with the confidence of someone who thinks he's already won. "Would you like to say something, Garrison?" he asked. The tone was almost gentle, magnanimous, the victor allowing the defeated one final word. "Yes," I said calmly, "I would." Vance smiled, nodded, gestured for me to speak. He thought this was his moment of triumph, thought the DNA test was his checkmate move, thought 6 years of planning had led to this perfect public trap. He had no idea that standing up was the signal Agent Brooks had been waiting for, the signal that meant we're ready. Begin. I looked at Vance Sterling across the tent, saw the confidence in his eyes, the certainty, the belief that he controlled this moment. 50 pairs of eyes turned from him to me, the antagonist standing center tent, holding a DNA test kit like a trophy. The protagonist standing at my table's edge, holding 6 weeks of evidence and 8 decades of legal experience. Vance looked curious, not worried, waiting for my response with the confidence of someone who thinks he's already won. His last mistake. I take the microphone with the same steady hand I used in federal court for 30 years. The weight feels familiar. Right. Vance is still smiling when I turn to face the 50 guests scattered across the white tent, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips. Cassandra sits motionless at the head table, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles have gone white. She is watching me, not Vance. That matters more than anything. "Thank you, Vance, for bringing this DNA test kit," I say clearly. My voice carries to every corner of the tent without effort. "You've saved me the trouble of introducing the subject myself." Vance's smile flickers, just for a second. Then it returns wider than before. "Actually, we don't need to open that kit," I continue, "because the results are already predetermined. This DNA test is fake. The results are rigged. I have proof." The tent erupts, not with noise but with a collective intake of breath so sharp it sounds like fabric tearing. I set a manila folder on the gift table beside Vance's blue DNA box. The contrast is deliberate, his theatrical prop next to my documented evidence. Vance Sterling was completely infertile when he signed the prenuptial agreement 6 years ago. I say, medical records confirm it. He knew he could never father a child naturally. The entire fertility struggle my daughter endured, every failed treatment, every tear she cried, thinking her body had failed her, was theater. He knew the truth all along. Cassandra makes a sound I have never heard before. Not a gasp, not a sob. Something between the two that cuts straight through me. "That's absurd," Vance says, but his voice has lost its music. "Garrison, you're embarrassing yourself. The baby Cassandra is carrying was conceived through IVF. I continue ignoring him entirely. But not with Vance's genetic material, with purchased sperm. Sperm he obtained illegally using a different woman's eggs, then had implanted in my daughter through fraud." Someone drops a champagne glass. The crystal shatters on the hardwood floor, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. Vance bribed the fertility doctor with $120,000. I say, he falsified consent forms. He manipulated medical records, all to create a biological child that would trigger a $6 million inheritance clause in a prenuptial agreement he designed specifically for this purpose. I watch 50 faces process this information. Watch confusion turn to horror and turn to understanding. These are not strangers. These are Cassandra's college friends. My former colleagues' family members who have known Vance for 6 years. They are watching him now with new eyes. I set a manila folder on the gift table beside Vance's blue DNA box. Inside this folder are the certified federal affidavits, the bank transfer logs, and the forensic data. We have the signed confession of Harper Finch, the nurse you bribed to swap the genetic material, and the tracked records of the offshore accounts you drained. Your trap is empty, Vance. The three witnesses form a triangle that pins him in place more effectively than any handcuffs. His smile is gone, completely gone. He is looking at me with an expression I have never seen before. Not anger, not fear, recognition. He finally realized what I knew 3 weeks ago in my library at 3 a.m. He is lost. 50 guests watch in silence as the circle closes. 50 witnesses who will remember this moment, who will testify if needed, who will never ever forget what they saw here today. Vance opens his mouth. Nothing comes out. For the first time in 6 years, he has no words. A voice from the back of the tent breaks the silence. I have something to say. I turn. Everyone turns. A man rises slowly from the last row of white chairs, where the overflow guests have been sitting for the past hour. He is 65 years old, with silver hair and a dark suit that looks expensive even from 30 feet away. His wife reaches for his arm. He does not look back. Conrad Sterling, Vance's father. He walks forward through the aisle between tables. 50 guests part without thinking, creating a path straight to the center where his son stands surrounded by witnesses. Nobody speaks, not even Vance. I knew about the Boston affair, Conrad says. His voice is steady but hollow, like something important has been carved out of it. 4 years ago, Valerie Dupont contacted me after the police investigation closed. She had documentation. She had proof. She wanted justice. He stops 10 feet from Vance. I paid her for silence. Conrad continues. $200,000 to make the problem disappear. Then I moved my son to Virginia, thinking a change of residence would change him. Thinking distance from the scene of his crime would somehow cure whatever was broken inside him. The tent is so quiet I can hear the roses rustling against the garden wall. I was wrong, Conrad says. He looks at Cassandra. His expression is devastated. I am so deeply sorry I did not stop him when I could. I told myself he would be different here, that he had learned, that love might fix what consequences never did. I was a coward and a fool, and you paid the price. Cassandra says nothing. Her hand rests on her belly, protective. I am ashamed, Conrad says quietly. I failed as a father. I failed you. I failed everyone my son has hurt. He sits down in the nearest chair. His wife has not followed him. She is still in the back row crying into her hands. Vance turns without warning and walks quickly toward the garden gate. His movement is smooth, unhurried, like a man leaving a boring party rather than fleeing his own destruction. He has always been good at pretending nothing matters. He makes it 12 steps. Agent Brooks stands at the garden gate with 2 uniformed police officers. They have been waiting there the entire time, positioned carefully out of sight behind the catering tent. Brooks is wearing the same navy suit he wore 3 weeks ago when I first walked into his Richmond office with a folder full of evidence. Vance Sterling. Agent Brooks says clearly, "You are under arrest for financial fraud, conspiracy to commit embezzlement, forgery, identity theft, and related federal crimes." One officer moves behind Vance. The handcuffs lock around his wrists with a metallic click that carries across the silent tent. The sound is final, permanent. After 3 weeks of investigation, after Harper's confession and Lucas's testimony and Valerie's documentation and Conrad's complicity, this is the moment that makes it real. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recites. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Vance does not resist, does not speak. He looks at his father just once, and his expression is completely blank. Then he looks away. I watch his face as the handcuffs lock into place. I search for remorse, for recognition of the harm he has caused, for shame or regret or even anger, for anything human beneath the careful mask he has worn for 6 years. I find nothing, absolutely nothing. Whatever capacity for genuine emotion once existed in Vance Sterling was burned out long ago, replaced entirely by calculation and performance. The officers lead him through the garden gate toward an unmarked police car waiting in the circular driveway. 50 witnesses watch in absolute silence as Vance Sterling disappears from view. The car door closes. The engine starts. The vehicle rolls slowly down the gravel drive and through the mansion gates. Someone starts clapping. I do not see who. The sound spreads quickly, awkward and uncertain at first, then building into something that feels less like applause and more like collective relief, like 50 people exhaling at once. A guest whispers to her companion, Did that really just happen at a baby shower? Testes stos presentaistes. I walk away from the tent. The afternoon sunlight is warm on my face. October in Virginia, the trees just beginning to turn gold at their edges. I head toward the oak tree at the edge of the garden, the one that has stood on this property for more than 100 years. The one where Cassandra played as a child, building fairy houses from acorns and moss. Footsteps behind me, slow and careful. Cassandra stops 3 feet away. Her hand rests on her round belly. Her eyes are red, but she is not crying. She has cried enough. "How long have you known Father?" she asks quietly. I consider lying. Consider softening the truth. I do not. 3 weeks, I say. Since the morning you called me at 3 a.m. without speaking. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed you safe first, I say. Truth without safety is just more danger. I had to dismantle every piece of his plan before you could see it clearly, before he could hurt you worse. She looks at me for a long moment, then she steps forward into my arms. I hold my daughter for the first time in 5 long years. She is warm and solid and real. Her belly presses against me round and full, my grandchild moving between us, with a gentle flutter I can feel through fabric. "I should have listened to you 5 years ago," she whispers into my shoulder. "You were in love," I say. "Love makes us hope people are better than they are. He was never better." "No, but you were never wrong to hope." 50 people stand scattered across the lawn in Virginia, afternoon sunlight, while I hold my daughter. The roses bloom pink and white along the garden wall. The oak tree stands exactly as it has for a century, solid and permanent and unchanged. Somewhere inside the mansion, a string quartet still waits with instruments, uncertain whether to continue playing. The mansion no longer feels empty. Today we won. 2 days after the arrest, I sit across from my daughter with morning tea and prepare to break her heart again. Cassandra is here in the mansion living room, the same room where I first opened Dr. Beck's anonymous email 3 weeks ago. She sits in the leather armchair by the window, morning light cutting through the old glass in patterns that haven't changed in 40 years. Her hand rests on her belly. She looks more rested than she has in weeks, but there is still a fragility around her eyes. "Is there something else you need to know?" I say. She sets down her teacup carefully. "More, the worst part," I say, "the part that made everything else possible." I tell her everything. The 3 a.m. call from Lucas Thorne in Boston. Meeting Dr. Beck in Chester. Harper's evidence box on my doorstep. Melissa's offshore discoveries. The Brazil ticket dated June 30th. And finally, the software. Vance installed message spoofing software on both our phones 5 years ago. I say, every text you sent me was intercepted and deleted before I received it. Every message I sent you disappeared the same way. For 5 years, we were both talking into silence, each thinking the other had stopped caring. Cassandra stares at me. Her teacup sits forgotten on the side table. Melissa's forensic accountant found the subscription receipts. I continue. Vance paid $300 a month to a company that specializes in isolating abuse victims from their families. The software logged everything. You sent me 347 messages over 5 years. I sent you 283. Neither of us received a single one. For 5 years, Cassandra says slowly, I sent you messages and you didn't receive them. No, I say, and I sent you messages every week. Birthday wishes, holiday greetings, questions about your life, apologies for whatever I thought I'd done to make you pull away. You never got them either. She stands up, suddenly walks to the window. Her reflection in the old glass looks like a ghost. I thought you hated me, she whispers. I thought you couldn't forgive me for marrying him against your advice. So I stopped trying. I told myself you were stubborn and cold, and I was better off without you. I thought the same, I say, that you'd chosen him over me and wanted nothing to do with your old life. I didn't know I was so lonely, she says, still facing the window, until I wasn't anymore. I watch her hand move to her pregnant belly, protective and automatic. She is thinking about her child, about the isolation Vance engineered in her, about making sure her daughter never experiences that manufactured loneliness. The silence stretches between us, but it is not empty. It is full of 5 years of stolen messages, full of birthday wishes that never arrived and apologies that disappeared into digital void, full of all the conversations we should have had. I'm sorry, I say finally. I should have tried harder, should have driven here in person instead of assuming silence meant choice. He was very good at what he did, Cassandra says quietly. We both believed exactly what he wanted us to believe. She turns from the window. Her eyes are wet, but she is not crying. "Thank you for not giving up," she says. "When the phone rang at 3 a.m., you could have ignored it. You could have assumed I was calling drunk or cruel or looking for money. But you answered, and you kept looking until you found the truth. You're my daughter." I say simply, there was never a question of giving up. 6 weeks later, I sat in Dorothy Fleming's law office while she read through the final legal outcomes. The prenup challenge had moved faster than most civil cases. Vance's guilty plea removed the need for contested litigation. The office is exactly as I remember from our first meeting 3 weeks ago. Dark wood law books, afternoon light through tall windows. But everything else has changed. Vance Sterling pleaded guilty to all charges. Dorothy says, reading from the court documents, 15 years federal prison, no possibility of parole for 10 years. She sets down the first page, picks up the next. The prenuptial agreement has been ruled completely void due to fraud in the inducement, she continues. Cassandra retains full ownership of the $8 million inheritance from her grandmother's estate. Additionally, the court ordered Vance to pay $2.5 million in restitution for emotional damages and financial harm. The offshore accounts, I ask. The Cayman account was frozen, Dorothy says. $1.5 million recovered and returned to Cassandra's trust. The remaining funds Vance laundered through Natalie Cross's firm were already spent mostly on gambling debts, but the court attached a lien to any future assets or earnings Vance might acquire. She flips to another page. And Natalie Cross, acquitted, Dorothy says. The prosecution determined she was a victim of Vance's deception, not an accomplice. She believed Vance was a legitimate client with legal income. I nod. That matches what Melissa discovered. Natalie was another person Vance used and discarded. Conrad Sterling paid $350,000 to Valerie DuPont. Dorothy continues, plus 6% annual interest dating back 4 years. The payment was finalized yesterday. His wife filed for divorce the same day. Dorothy closes the file folder. The sound is final. Every perpetrator has been held accountable, she says. Every victim has received restitution or justice or both. The legal process is complete. Is justice ever truly complete when 6 years of life cannot be returned? When a daughter's trust and love has been shattered? When a grandchild will grow up knowing their biological father is in federal prison? When 5 years of messages disappeared into manufactured silence? But Dorothy is right. Justice came. Not perfect, never finished, but it came. I drive home to the mansion, where Cassandra waits 9 months pregnant, preparing for the life Vance Sterling tried to steal. The oak tree stands solid in the afternoon light. The library window glows warm. The house is no longer empty. Justice came, and tomorrow new life begins. I have waited 3 hours and 47 minutes to meet my first grandchild. The waiting room at Richmond Women's Hospital is quiet at this hour. An early May evening, the last of the day's warmth pressing gently against the windows. I sit in an uncomfortable chair with my phone face down on my knee, watching the double doors that lead to the delivery wing. Other families come and go. A young couple rushes past holding flowers. An older woman dozes in the corner chair, her knitting abandoned in her lap. Cassandra has been in labor since noon. The nurses update me every hour with the same calm professionalism. Everything is progressing, normally. First babies take time, she's doing beautifully. I nod and thank them, and return to this chair where I count ceiling tiles and wonder how many grandfathers have sat in this exact spot, feeling this exact mixture of anticipation and fear. The double doors open. A nurse in blue scrubs looks directly at me. She is smiling. "Mr. Vance," she says, "you can come in now. Mother and baby are doing beautifully." I follow her through the double doors down a hallway that smells like antiseptic and hope to room 217. The door is already open. Soft light spills into the corridor. Cassandra is propped up on the hospital bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted and radiant in equal measure. She is holding a bundle wrapped in a pink and white striped blanket. The bundle is tiny, impossibly tiny. "Dad," Cassandra says softly. "This is Evelyn." I cross the room without remembering the steps between. I sit in the chair beside her bed and look at my first grandchild. Evelyn is asleep. Her eyes are closed, her face smaller than my palm. Her skin is that newborn red-pink that looks almost translucent. Her fists are opening and closing slowly, instinctively, as if she is learning to grasp the world one finger at a time. Named after great-grandma, Cassandra says. There are tears on her face, but she is smiling. I wanted her to have a name that meant something, that connected her to family instead of to the man who tried to weaponize her existence. Evelyn's tiny fist opens, and I reach out carefully, extending one finger. Her hand closes around it immediately. The grip is surprisingly strong, determined. "Hello, sweetheart," I whisper. "I'm your grandfather." I do not know if I am laughing or crying. Possibly both. After everything we have been through, after 3 weeks of investigation and confrontation and arrest and legal battles, after 6 years of fraud and 5 years of manufactured isolation and 1,825 days of estrangement, this is the reward. This small person with her great-grandmother's name gripping my finger like she will never let go. I hold Evelyn's hand and realize she will never know the isolation Vance Sterling engineered. She will grow up in a mansion full of love instead of empty silence. She will have a grandfather who answers phone calls at 3 in the morning. She will have a mother who learned the hard way that trust is earned and family is worth fighting for. She will carry her great-grandmother's name forward into a future that is safe and secure and free. She's perfect, I say. She is, Cassandra agrees. Despite everything he did, despite all his plans and manipulations, she's just a baby who needs to be loved. And she will be. Evelyn makes a small sound, somewhere between a sigh and a yawn. Her fist tightens on my finger, then relaxes. She is already asleep again, exhausted from the work of being born. "I should let you rest," I say. "Stay a little longer," Cassandra says. "Please." So I sit beside my daughter while she holds my granddaughter, and I watch them both in the soft hospital light. This is what Vance Sterling tried to steal. Not money, not inheritance. This. Connection. Family. The simple, profound miracle of 3 generations breathing in the same room. My phone vibrates in my pocket. I pull it out carefully, trying not to disturb Evelyn's grip on my finger. Dorothy Fleming. I stand slowly extracting my finger from Evelyn's hand with gentle pressure. She does not wake. I step into the hallway and answer. "Dorothy," I say quietly. "I have news," she says, and there is something bright in her voice. The court just issued the final ruling on the prenuptial agreement. It is completely invalidated. "We knew that," I say, "the infidelity clause." "No," Dorothy interrupts. "Not just the infidelity clause, the entire contract, every provision. The judge ruled that the fertility at signing loophole means the whole agreement was signed under fraudulent conditions. The contract does not exist. Legally, it never existed." I lean against the hospital wall. Down the corridor, a baby is crying. Not Evelyn. Someone else's grandchild entering the world. "Cassandra lost nothing," Dorothy continues. "Absolutely nothing. The inheritance was always hers. The trust was always protected. Vance Sterling's entire 6-year plan was built on a contract that the court has now erased from legal existence. Justice and joy arriving together, like twins inseparable, both long awaited. Dorothy's voice delivers freedom through a phone in a hospital hallway, while new life cries in the next room. The timing feels almost orchestrated, though. I know it is simply coincidence. The court does not care that today is the day my granddaughter was born. They do not know that the woman Vance tried to trap is lying exhausted in room 217, holding a baby named after her grandmother. But I know, and the symmetry feels like grace. "Thank you, Dorothy," I say, "for everything. Go be with your family," she says gently. "That's where you belong now." I hang up and walk back into room 217. Cassandra looks up from Evelyn's sleeping face. "Dorothy," she asks. I sit down beside her again. Evelyn's hand finds my finger immediately, her grip automatic and trusting. "Everything's all right, honey," I say. "Everything." Cassandra does not ask for details. She just nods and rests her head back against the pillow, holding our Evelyn close. The prenup is void. The inheritance is secure. Vance Sterling is in prison. And this small person with her great-grandmother's name is learning to breathe and grasp and exist in a world that is finally safe. Everything that was broken is being rebuilt, one moment at a time. 1 months have passed and the mansion is no longer empty. The transformation happened gradually then, all at once. First came the phone calls that were actually answered. Then the weekly dinners. Then Cassandra asking if I would mind company for a few days while her apartment lease ended. Then those few days becoming a week, becoming permanent. I want Evelyn to grow up with history. She told me while unpacking boxes in the guest room that used to be hers. With roots, with great-grandmother's garden and grandfather's library and the oak tree that's been here longer than all of us. I want her to know where she comes from. So now there are baby blankets folded on the leather couch in the living room, a changing table in the upstairs bathroom, a bassinet beside Cassandra's bed. The mansion has been many things over the decades' monument fortress tomb. Now it is simply home. I stand in the doorway watching my daughter carry Evelyn along the rose bushes in the autumn garden. The roses are dormant now, bare, thorny stems waiting for spring, but Cassandra walks the path as if the blooms are still there. "These are the roses your great-grandmother planted," Cassandra says to the 3-month-old sleeping in her arms. "You were named after her, Evelyn Marguerite. She would have loved you so much." Evelyn sleeps with that absolute peace only babies know, her small face tucked against Cassandra's shoulder. She does not know that her father is in federal prison, does not know about prenuptial fraud or offshore accounts or message-spoofing software, does not know that her existence was meant to be a weapon. She knows only warmth and milk and her mother's heartbeat. Cassandra stops at the oldest rosebush, the one planted 60 years ago, when my mother first moved into this house as a bride. "She would have loved to meet you, sweetheart," I say from the doorway. Cassandra turns smiling. She's meeting her through me, through us, through every story I tell. This scene is what I waited 1,825 days for. Not the truth revealed or justice served, not the prenup voided or the money restored. This, my daughter in her great-grandmother's garden telling stories to the next generation. The continuity of family, the simple, profound miracle of a mother showing her child where she belongs. I remember standing in this same garden 5 years ago when Cassandra last visited before Vance Sterling isolated her completely. She had been distant that day, her phone buzzing constantly with messages I now know were manufactured. She left before dinner, said she had plans. I watched her walk to the car and wondered what I had done wrong. Cassandra carries Evelyn back toward the house. "It's getting cold," she says. "I should feed her." "I'll make tea," I offer. "Thank you, Dad." 2 words, simple, ordinary, more valuable than any amount of inheritance or restitution. That evening, after Cassandra has fed Evelyn and put her down for the night, after the house has settled into its new rhythms, I find myself walking to the library. I do not plan it. My feet simply carry me there, following a pattern worn into the floorboards over decades. The library looks exactly as it did 4 months ago when Lucas Thorne called at 3 in the morning and shattered the silence. Same oak table, same lamp with the green glass shade, same leather chair where I sat in darkness, trying to understand why my daughter would call and say nothing. The bourbon glass is still there on the side table. I have not touched it since that night. It sits with 2 fingers of amber liquid, a monument to the moment everything changed. I sit down in the chair. The leather creaks under my weight, familiar and worn. From the next room I can hear Cassandra singing softly. A lullaby. Something about stars and dreams and safety. The house was silent then. Now it is filled with lullabies. I look at the bourbon glass for a long moment. Think about the man who poured that drink 4 months ago. He was alone in a mansion that felt like a mausoleum. He was certain his daughter had abandoned him. He was preparing to live out his remaining years in empty rooms, convinced that whatever mistake he had made was permanent and unforgivable. That man does not exist anymore. He was reshaped by investigation and confrontation, and the revelation that isolation can be manufactured as easily as affection can be faked. He learned that sometimes protecting what matters most means going through the darkest places. That truth without safety is just more danger. That justice is not always clean, but it can still be complete. The library chair holds the same shape it did 4 months ago. But I no longer fit that shape. I have been changed by what happened between then and now. I reach for the bourbon glass, then stop. Set my hand down on the armrest instead. Stand up. Turn off the lamp. The library falls into darkness. I walk to the doorstep through it and close it behind me without looking back. From upstairs, Cassandra's lullaby drifts down through the old house. Evelyn makes a small sound, not quite crying, just announcing her presence. Cassandra's voice softens, adapts, continues. Sometimes to protect what matters most, you have to go through the darkest places. You have to investigate and confront and dismantle and risk everything you thought was certain. You have to sit in libraries at 3 in the morning, making phone calls to strangers and reading evidence that breaks your heart. But when you reach the other side, when you walk out of that library and close the door behind you, The light there is more real than anything you have ever known. The mansion is no longer empty. 3 generations breathe under the same roof. Tomorrow, Evelyn will wake up in a house full of history and love and great-grandmother's roses waiting for spring. Today I walk toward the light. Morning light breaks through the oak tree branches the way it has for 100 years. I stand at the garden's edge watching dawn arrive. Old habit from when my wife was alive, before the silence, before the empty years. Even during the 1,825 days, when Cassandra would not speak to me, I came here at dawn and watched the light change from gray to gold. The French doors open behind me, footsteps on the stone path. Cassandra walks toward me carrying Evelyn wrapped in a pale blue blanket, the same color as the sky beginning to lighten above us, the same color as the dress she wore at the cafe when she discovered the unauthorized transfers. Full circle. She stops beside me without speaking. We stand together in the morning mist, the autumn garden still soft and cool before the day's heat arrives, watching the garden wake. Evelyn sleeps against her mother's shoulder, 3 months old and entirely peaceful. She does not know where she is or the battles fought to protect her. She knows only warmth and safety. She's still asleep, Cassandra says quietly. Doesn't know how lucky she is to wake up here. She'll know, I say. We'll make sure she knows. The tree rises massive and ancient before us, bare branches reaching toward the pale sky. My grandfather planted this tree before I was born. 70 years it has stood here witnessing everything. I remember standing in this exact spot 4 months ago. The morning after I discovered the prenuptial fraud, after reading Melissa's reports about offshore accounts and message spoofing software, I stood here staring at this tree and wondering if Cassandra would ever stand beside me again. If the silence would ever end. If I would die alone in this garden with no one to remember what it meant. Now she stands here, not because I forced the truth on her, but because I made her safe first. Because I dismantled every piece of Vance Sterling's scheme before telling her what he had done. I used to climb to the 3rd branch, Cassandra says, looking up through the bare limbs. Thought I could touch the sky from there. I remember, I say. Your mother had a heart attack every time. You never fell. I was careful, she says, even then. Evelyn will climb it too, I say, when she's older, when she's ready. Cassandra shifts Evelyn in her arms protective. And I'll have the same heart attack my mother did. Probably I agree. The Virginia dawn arrives in layers, first gray, then pearl, then the pale blue that means clear weather. The same sky that covered this land when my grandfather planted this tree. The same sky that will cover it when Evelyn brings her own children here decades from now. Some things cannot be taken. Vance Sterling tried to take everything. My daughter, my granddaughter, the inheritance my mother built. He manufactured isolation, forged documents, bribed doctors, spoofed messages, built an entire architecture of deception designed to steal what was never his. But he could not take the roots of this tree, could not take the father-daughter bond that survived 1,825 days of silence, could not take the sunrise that comes every morning on this land, regardless of who claims to own it. The oak tree's roots run deeper than any deception could ever reach. The branches stretch higher than any scheme could ever climb. 4 generations have been sheltered beneath this foliage through every season of darkness and light. My grandfather planted it with his own hands, believing in a future he would not live to see. Me, who protected it through storms and the temptation to sell when the land felt too empty. Cassandra, who climbed its branches as a child and now returns as a mother. Evelyn, who will learn to climb when her time comes, who will bring her own children here someday and tell them about the great-great-grandfather who planted roots that could not be stolen. Do you remember, Cassandra asks, what Grandma used to say about this tree? Which thing, I ask. She had a dozen sayings. Yeah, the one about storms, Cassandra says. After that hurricane knocked down the fence but left the tree standing. I remember. The deeper the roots, the fiercer the storm it can weather. The deeper the roots, Cassandra repeats softly. She looks down at Evelyn, then back at the tree. We weathered it, Dad. The storm came, and we're still standing. We are, I say. The sun breaks over the eastern horizon, spilling gold across the frost-covered garden. The light catches the oak tree's bare branches and turns them luminous. The roses along the garden wall are already fading at their edges, early autumn, settling gently over the estate. The house behind us is full of life. 3 generations under one roof, lullabies instead of silence, baby blankets on leather couches, all the small ordinary miracles of a home that is lived in. Evelyn stirs in Cassandra's arms, making a small sound, not crying, just announcing that she is waking, that she is here, that she exists. "Good morning, sweetheart," Cassandra whispers. "Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life." I look up through the oak tree branches at the brightening sky. The sunrise comes every morning on this land. It came during the 1,825 days of silence. It came the morning Lucas Thorne called at 3 a.m. It came the day we confronted Vance Sterling before 50 witnesses. It came the day Evelyn was born. It will come tomorrow and the day after, and every morning for as long as this tree stands and this land endures. Some things cannot be taken. Some roots run too deep. Some bonds survive every storm. The light is here. We are home. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Silence is never just silence. For 5 years I accepted the quiet. I told myself my daughter had made her choice, and I respected it. That was my mistake. I should have driven to her house, should have shown up unannounced, should have trusted my instinct that something was wrong instead of trusting the silence. Don't make my mistake. When someone you love goes quiet, ask why. This family betrayal taught me something I wish I'd known sooner. Family betrayal doesn't always look like hatred. Sometimes it looks like a charming son-in-law who isolates your daughter so slowly you don't notice until 5 years have passed. Every family story has moments where we choose between comfort and courage. I chose comfort for too long, but I believe God gave me that 3 a.m. phone call at exactly the moment I was ready to hear it. Not a moment sooner, not a moment later. The truth will surface if you're brave enough to look for it. If this family story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced family betrayal, or do you know someone who has? Share this family story with anyone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to Revenge Dad. Your support means everything to me. Thank you for staying until the very end. Remember, some details in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, but the lesson is real. Protect the people you love. Trust your instincts, and never accept silence when your heart tells you something is wrong.